But you would help me if I got that big, right?
Oh, absolutely. We'd put in the EOS system and you'd be great.
Good. That's what I'm counting on you for. But I've had these conversations, and so I'm curious if there's data on this, and maybe like I wish I had Scott Barr on the call to maybe help with this. How many people do we like? Let's assume 25% of the existing inventory of parks that are mostly transient right now were to switch to even 80-20, long-term 80, short-term 20. Is there actually enough people who are staying long-term at campgrounds to fill up just 25% of that?
Good question. One of the trends that people are going to the more long-term is it's a more stable income. And if they're buying these for investments, they don't want to manage them. And it's way easier to manage a seasonal park than it is to manage a transient park. But you are limited in your revenue to what the market will bear for a seasonal campground. If you're a transient campground, you're usually looking that if you would rent that site for the full 30 days for the month, you're going to triple your income versus what you get for a monthly. So it comes down to how hard they want to work at their campground and what type of investment they're looking for. Taking it to a more seasonal type situation or year-round people, quasi-mobile home park basically, is the easier solution. You don't have as much management, you don't have as much cost, and it works out good for Brent because right now most of the PMS systems that are out there are based on reservation revenue. You've got a good niche market with your product, depending on what your cost is, because nobody's servicing that industry, because that's not how they make their money. They make their money on the reservations. So if you can be a low-cost operator in that sector, you're going to do great.
This is fascinating to me what you just said, Jeff, and I don't want to get you off topic, but that's actually very fast. I was watching a long video last night about the future of work, and I know you told me I was going to bring up AI, right? But like the agents that are going to do the work. And they were talking about what you just talked about. They were talking about how software is currently priced from like a Zendesk, HubSpot perspective, all that kind of stuff, right? And how they're all priced based on seat. And so what happens when the seats aren't filled with humans anymore? Like Zendesk is a $2 billion a year revenue company. What happens when they're not charging per human anymore? They've got to rethink all of these models and how all this stuff works. And so I think there's for sure a place for software that focuses on long-term. I think everybody's got to rethink how they're doing things depending on how the market shifts, right? Not always short-term reactive, changing your pricing every year, but I think we're seeing perhaps a clear shift in the way things are going to go for the next little while, at least. Would you agree or no?
Yeah. And some of that comes from, you know that I work with a couple other PMS systems as a consultant for them. And that's one of the directions that we're looking at is how do we reach that market in a profitable way while still offering, high quality backdrop service for the program, because there's going to be a limit to what a seasonal park is going to pay for a PMS system. I think probably one of your biggest competitors is Rent Manager that can do that, but they are not cheap. I used to use them. So
how much are they?
I sold all my parks. I don't know anymore.
How much were they that made you think they were expensive?
Between $475 to $650 per month.
100?
Yes.
Okay.
But they handled the whole park from billing, water bills, everything. So it's a very good system. But
But for long term, I can see now. I'm thinking in my head like that's like a fifth of what I pay for like my mid tier stuff. But like I'm not thinking it from a long term
right,
cap on. Okay,
yeah, and a lot of these seasonal parks that Brent was talking about are probably 50 to 100 spaces. Uh, that would be that nut would be a killer. So there's a market for that, but and I have people that would be in the market for that system because I do consult to quite a few seasonal parks also, um, and they're always looking for ways to get good data, but keep the cost down. So
so I want to. Sorry, finish your thought. I thought you were done. I'm
no,
sorry.
that was it. No,
I
I'm
was just
done.
gonna say I want to make sure we answer it like not my question because it's not necessarily the most important, but I am curious. Like, did we ever talk? Like, did we ever finalize that? Like, how many people do we actually think are on the road staying long term? Because there's that piece of it, right? We talked about. I think you talked about how easy, which is an important discussion to have. To be clear, is how easy it is, and I think that was, um, the point. But how many of these people are actually out there? Can they actually fill these properties if you convert to long term? Because it might be easier on you up until the point where you're like, because we've had calls with these clients, right? Middle of the Texas is a good example of where it's now overbuilt, and a lot of people are switching to seasonal because they thought they could attract, or maybe they started that way. But then they have the same amenities as everybody else. I have a pool, I have a miniature golf course, I have a great store, I have nice bathrooms, but so does the 15 other parks that were within a 5 mile radius of me that were just built in the last 4 years. So what is assuming there's enough people to even begin to make those businesses profitable, all they're close together, right? At what point, like, what is the difference maker that's causing them to choose your property over the other? Because it's not that you also have something, it's that you have, and we'll talk about experience later, but you have something different.
I think that it definitely your region will distinguish whether or not you're going to have much more demand. You brought up Texas. That's a great example where you can build a new 1,000-site campground. In the Northeast, you cannot build a campground from scratch. Can't do it. I can count on one hand how many people have built a campground from scratch in all of the Northeast in the last decade. And it took them years and years and years, and it just wasn't cost effective. So you get a region here where even adding new sites to an existing campground can take years if you ever get the approvals. So we have a different model up in the Northeast than you would have in a place like Texas, where they're popping up left and right. So in a region like that, which is also similar to some of the other regions out there, there are some states that are, much more highly regulated and won't be able to build as easily as Texas. The demand in the last several years since COVID for seasonal sites has been astronomical. Before COVID, almost nobody had wait lists, right, for seasonals except the premier parks.
Yep.
Right? Since COVID, almost everybody has a wait list, and they still have a wait list. Now, I saw last year a little bit of a shift that the seasonal rates went up so much, they basically offset the reduction that we saw in the transient traffic. A lot of parks were a little bit down on transients last year for various reasons. It could be weather, it could be market related, depending on the park, depending on the region. We still have the majority of the parks having wait lists, at least in the Northeast, for seasonals. So it's that market factor of when do we stop? How much do we switch over to the seasonal? And my attitude, when I'm talking to these owners, I always say, look, same thing with your rates. You go up until you no longer have a wait list, right?
Yeah.
And if you have a wait list, then add more sites if you can. Otherwise, consider converting. But conversion from transient to seasonal takes a long time because you're already taking reservations for next year at most of these parks. So if you've already taken a reservation for next year for that site, what are you going to do? Call the person up and cancel it because you could, but not necessarily the best approach in terms of customer service. But that's what some of these campgrounds are thinking. In terms of the newer owners, the newer operators out there, I see since COVID, 100% of my sales have been to investors, and that's for another discussion for another day. I'm sure Brian's had these discussions as well. But the market is going to completely change in the next 10 years because we're losing most of those owner operators and we're switching over to an investor model. Now, there's two kinds of investors out there. There's the multi-park investor that has owned campgrounds for years and they run them themselves. And then there's the majority of the investors out there who are new to the industry or newer and are looking for property management companies. And there's not a lot of options out there for, a property management company.
Good quality one, yeah.
Do the entire portfolio for this group. They'll have a hotel management company coming in and running a campground. Well, it's different. It might be hospitality, but it's still different. And that's where we're having some reduction in some of these, especially the private equity buyers, the private equity investor out there. They're kind of backing off. They bought a few and then they fell flat on their face because they didn't know how to run them. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have a good option to run them. So there is a huge need for property management companies nationwide to offer these services in campgrounds, not all hospitality, but specifically campgrounds. And that need is only going to continue to grow for the next decade as most of these owner-operator parks are going to be switching over to investors, kind of similar to what happened in motels years ago, where most of those motels were smaller owner-operators, and now they were bought up by, the Hiltons and the Holiday Inns of the world, and they're, multi-park owners. So we're seeing that switch. But back to what Brent said earlier about the cost to run these sites. Absolutely, it is cheaper to run an all seasonal and or all annual park, long-term stay park. It is probably about a 40% expense ratio is what I generally see on a long-term park versus anywhere from a 55 to a 75 expense ratio, 55% to a 75% expense ratio on a transient park, right? The higher the expense, it's usually the KOAs, the Jellystones, they have higher fees. But, generally it depends on the size, but that's a decent range. But certainly it is much, much cheaper to run those and much easier to run those long-term parks. And I see a lot of those new investor buyers leaning towards that model. Unfortunately, you don't make as much money, right? So it all comes down to cash flow, right? That's how they value these parks. That's what they want. They want their return on their investment. It's all about, they're investors. It's no emotion here. It's not a hobby for them. They want to make that return. And they're going to do that. They're going to run it whatever model they can to make the most out of it. And in an area that has, incredible demand for transients because you're in a tourist area. Well, chances are they are going to buy up that park and they're going to kick everybody out and go transient, even though it costs more to run it because the demand is there for it. But then there's a lot of other regions where they become the destination location. They're not going to fill that park with transients unless they become the amusement, right? And that's very expensive to put, $3 million water park in or whatever,
Yeah, the most famous one I know is Howard, Port Huron KOA. You know him, Jeff.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very well. Created something out of nothing up there. But go ahead, Mia.
Yeah, so I mean, when I talk to owners about this in particular, about thinking about what your business model needs to be, it can't be, let's change it next month, right? Because this is a long term. Again, it goes back to if you want to convert a seasonal to a transient or a transient to a seasonal, right? That's probably more what's happening right now. If you have a reservation, you've got to think about the long-term play. Same thing as you're thinking about gas prices, all right? Gas prices are up. People want to stay in one location, right? Gas prices go down. It's not rocket science, right? They're more willing to drive further if gas prices are lower. So I always talk to owners about thinking long term. Actually do a business model. Use your software, right? Almost everybody has software. And these software programs can do tremendous things. They just don't know how to use them, right? Brent, I'm sure you could talk about that all day
100%.
long, that there's so many features that you can utilize and reports that you can run that they're just not utilizing to help them guide their business model in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now. That's what they need to be doing. This year, they're already done. They've already got reservations. There's nothing, some stuff, but in terms of the bigger picture, there's not much they can do for this year. But they can still grow revenue in other ways. But in terms of conversion, seasonal versus transients, I think that we're going to see a consistent shift. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. Right now, there's more demand for seasonals than parks need to address.
Even in the Northeast?
Even in the Northeast, most campgrounds have seasonal wait lists.
So the reason I ask here is twofold. A ton of what you said I could follow up on, right? And I'm old and probably remembered 22% of it. But the couple things that stuck out in my head when you were talking is we went through something similar in Canada with I don't know if it was an overcorrection, but in Ontario specifically, where they have so many seasonal properties in Ontario that none of the transient people can find anywhere to stay. And so I think it's important for us to consider where this market is going. And I know there's a lot of, we don't know, right? A lot of intangibles, a lot of data that we have never seen before. But to understand, I don't think that anybody here is saying like you should do this at your property right now, because every property is unique, as Jeff knows, consulting from many different people. But I think there's a general rule here that we can kind of establish that says, I think we just said it, Mia, right? That there's plenty of people out there who are going for seasonal. Do you convert to transient? I think it depends on where you are and how much you're willing to invest in marketing and all that. But to your point too, Mia, about property management companies, there are some that are very good, like CRR Hospitality is one. Mike, I shouldn't even give him a shout out because he missed the show. But CRR Hospitality is one that specializes in RV park and campground management. Blue Water is right there in the Northeast, right? They have a very good, I know they do hotels too, but they have a lot of experience in campgrounds. So there are a couple out there, and there are more, right? Scott
There are
Food.
certainly a couple, but a lot of these.
They're not a lot.
Don't have capacity.
Yes.
And they also, for a company like Blue Water, I don't think they'll do a lot of the smaller parts.
And that's what my secondary point was, right. Is when you get to the long term of the seasonal, just like we talked about how it doesn't make sense for a camp spot or a new book, and I'm putting words in their mouth to be clear, they may think differently about this, to change their pricing model around and figure out how to make money from long term, the same thing as the third party management.
Well, I actually just had, I won't say the specific software unless you want me to. I just had a meeting because I'm actually in the process of buying a campground myself, and it's mostly
congratulations.
So my partner and I had a meeting with the software company Monday, and I have another company that I'm meeting with on Friday, specifically about the cost. So I'm chuckling when this is brought up earlier about the cost of long term. And the way this particular company works is they charge $2 a month per seasonal site. So
that's pretty. That's
$2 a month. That's I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of other features that I can work in reimbursement for electric. Mike's point, if I needed to. When they get on there and they have to do some sort of reimbursement, I can just pass that cost off to them. Similar to what, the per reservation fee, right? If there's a $350 reservation fee for every reservation, these companies are making a lot of money because you might have a transient park making thousands of reservations every year, right? But if you have 150 seasonals, I got 150 reservations, that's it, right?
Yep.
So now I'm getting charged, or we only have probably 10 or 20 transient sites, very small amount. Right. So now I'm thinking, okay, well, how do I pass that cost off? If I'm only getting charged $2 a month, then I think there's easy ways for me to build that into my cost, either in their rate or when they log on to do something like pay their tab, because I'm going to run a tab for them in the store, or pay their electric reimbursement. I'm just going to add a processing fee of $3, right? Yep. Because I'm also getting charged 3%, just under 3% on the credit card processing on top of that. So let's say instead of $2 a month. I'm charging them $3 or $4 a month, right? There's ways to build that in so it's palatable to my customer, right? So there's lots of ways to do that. And I think that some of the software companies now certainly need to start focusing on a better business model for them to offer long-term pricing, right? Because a lot of these parks do have that. And often what happens is they don't even put those sites in the system, right? They might have 100 sites that are seasonal and 100 that are not.
Yeah, because you don't need online reservations because you're calling and asking a bunch of questions. Yeah.
But now you're passing up all the other opportunities, things that you can link your store, your POS, your electric, your, gas, whatever it is that you need, even the gate chart, the gate linking, the gate codes and stuff. You're passing up all of those other opportunities. So I think it's worth it paying a little bit more to have all those seasonals in one spot, right? Along with your transients. But that's just me. And
Swear to God, we're going to get to electricity, Mike.
Right. Some of the points that she brought up, Brian, lead up to Mike, because one is
they do. So sorry, they do. But 1 second, real quick, because I want to think about pricing here for a second, because the same thing applies, and I don't think we're going to solve this on this call, but the same thing applies to the reservation system. In my head, I'm thinking of them, and again, I'm putting words in all of their mouths, right? But in my head, I'm thinking like, well, you want me to hire how many developers to work on a feature for something I may or may not make money from that's going to take me a couple years to build out a feature set for? And then will there be that many seasonals in 3 years as there is now? And will it even be worth my time? And then how do I differentiate that? Like Scott Barr and I were talking about this, about how campground owners view long-term stays as seasonal, but campers view long-term stays as a couple weeks. And so how do you actually define that process to make sure that you're charging versus, the correct rate to the campground who maybe has a mix of 80-20 or 50-50? So it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'll say something.
I was going to say as you know, being in the market a long time, people buy RVs, and their first year they're going to travel everywhere, and then they find out kind of what a pain in the butt it is to travel everywhere. So they end up becoming a seasonal someplace, and then if they want to travel, they'll unhook and go. But
how many? Okay, I'm sorry. I know I'm interrupting you, but I'm going back to the same. We don't have an answer for this, right? How many of these people are actually out there that are full-time RVers in 2025 that don't own a house? I think it's a lot less than it was a few years ago.
Yeah, it's heading back to where it was. But one thing that you've got now that you didn't have before is mobile work, Wi-Fi, and the ability to stay on the road. So we have a lot more people that can go out on the road for months at a time.
Okay.
They may still have a permanent residence, but
That's
they can
fair.
go out on the road for a long time because you can get a mail server that basically will send you by email all of your mail. And it's still a good market, but yeah, to answer your point, where's the market driving? We do see a big demand in seasonal, especially in the Northeast. One of the reasons is because of what Mia brought up was it's very difficult to get a park built in the Northeast. So you don't have a lot of new transient. If you do, they're full. A few of my friends own campgrounds up there, and they're full the year out. After they close for the season, they're fully reserved for next year, both transient and seasonal. It's a different market than, say, North Dakota, where you're scrapping for every tenant you can get, whether they're seasonal or a transient. And also the East Coast pricing makes the seasonal park attractive, because if I was getting $8,500 a site, I'd have a lot more seasonals, but we're not getting that in the Midwest. But to her point about how you can charge back the seasonal cost, I see a trend not only with electric, but charging back the water and sewer eventually. Because even the parks that have septic and well that tell me they have no cost, in 2 years when they have to replace that well or re-drill it or change the septic system, they'll find out that they've had a very big cost all those years that they've been ignoring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So somehow they've got to work that into their formulas to get paid for that. I won't go down the financial hole that Brian goes down
really
AI
do it, don't
holes.
you?
I go down financial holes. So
I would like to hear when you're done. I want to hear from Brent on because I think he was going to talk before.
Yep. Sorry.
And then I want to pivot to Mike.
Yeah, I was going to touch on what Mia mentioned about pricing, and this is not to toot open campgrounds horn by any stretch, but just kind of give you an idea of how we were thinking. So we were, again, thinking long term of saying, okay, if more people are going towards long-term stays, and the average software is really reservation based, or they charge, $2.50 per transaction or per seat or per site, what I've seen as well, we didn't want to copy that model. So what we did was saying, okay, how about we just let the customer keep the per reservation fee that they want to charge. So hypothetically, if they want to charge $3 per reservation, they can keep that. We're not going to take any of that money, right? So our system is geared that way to where you can charge whatever you want. And we kind of tell the customers, like, listen, if you don't want to use the term booking fee, use service fee, use maintenance fee, use, property fee, whatever it is. It's up to that's your choice. Only thing that we do is we say, okay, we're just going to charge the guests 2.95%, whether it's Visa, MasterCard, Amex, for the guest stay. That's it, right? So we don't charge any monthly subscriptions. We just say you can pass that on to the guests. But if you're generous, then we'll give you a better rate if you want to absorb the fee yourself, right? So that's how we've taken it, because we're recognizing that if you're going to have long-term guests, most likely those guests are going to pay, hopefully with the credit card, and that way you can, they just pick up the charge and you don't have to worry about it, right? So we're trying to be configurable with our pricing. We're not trying to be kind of one way. We're trying to say, listen, if your park is configurable, if it's 50-50 split or 80-20 split, then we will accommodate that need.
Can we go to Mike or Mia? Do you have questions for Brent about your park? I'm messing with you. I'm just kidding.
I'm going to be talking to Brent after this.
Yeah.
Mike,
So I'm not the expert here, but let me catch up on it.
When you talk about electricing, didn't you tell me at some point you're going to go into water too?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So we'll touch on that as well. I'm not an expert on rates or site types, but just listening to the conversation, I think the one mistake is that we're lumping everything into long-term, right? And there's different types of long-term. We've got parks that are an hour and a half from major metropolitans, and those are, they do a site lease, but it's a weekend thing. People are going there to stay the weekend, and they just happen to leave their equipment there all week. Versus somebody, to Jeff's point, that's on the road, full-time RVing. That's a very different clientele than a park that's catering to weekenders. That's their second home, right? That's where you go for the weekend to go fishing and hang out with friends. So that's a very different clientele. The one thing we have seen is oversaturated markets. So we can tell where development has slowed, like in the Houston area. And then markets that are still expanding and booming. I would say Florida, I'm working with a lot of new development projects in Florida specifically. They are still building. They are big parks. They're, 500 plus site properties still coming out of the dirt. So, different markets are seeing different types of things happening for sure. And then I can't go into it, but we've got an interesting client in Florida that is building a unique property with lots of amenity types on property, and that will attract and fill up 1,000 spaces that they're working on, just because there's so many things that you'll be able to do at their property. So you do have to consider all the different types of properties out there.
Will those people, I don't want to derail you, sorry.
Yeah, no, go.
Will those, like, again, you talk about Florida still being built, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will that new 1,000-site park with all its amenities attract 1,000 new people to Florida, though, or will it pull 1,000 people from other existing parks, in your unscientific opinion?
Yeah, unscientifically, it appears to be still new growth.
Okay.
It's new equipment still hitting the parks. It's not people pulling a rig that's 5 years old, 6 years old from another park. It is still new rigs coming in there because they're nicer high-end parks, the ones that are being built. So they are attracting the higher rates and new people. And they're doing it in phases, right? So when I say 1,000-site park, they're not opening day one with 1,000 sites. They're bringing on 350 and then another 200, and then it's just It's phase after phase after phase coming up online.
Right. Hey, Mike. Quick question on that. On your new builds, how many of them are building and then selling the lots outright?
Yeah, very few. Very few are doing that anymore. I saw that more 4 years ago than I do today. So, yeah, they're not. They'll do an annual lease, that type of thing.
Okay, because I've a few of the parks that I visited for comparisons down in Florida were not member parks, but you actually had deed to your lot.
Deed, absolutely.
And some of them had surprisingly quick uptake where they sold out, and then others were kind of slow to develop. For a developer, it takes the operation of it out, and then you have the HOA where you make your money from.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And in Florida, I don't want an HOA because their laws are tough.
They are tough. You're absolutely right. Water is an interesting topic. We are being asked more and more and more for water. It's kind of surprising, but even the water rates. You've got some parks that are directly in major metropolitan areas like Tampa, and they're on commercial water, and that's one of their big expenses right next to electrical. Is they've got a water bill that's huge, $250,000. So you got to recover that somehow. And it's funny, I have so many videos and pictures of water spraying out of RVs and spigot. If people don't care and you're not measuring it, that's an uncontrolled expense. Same with electric. If you're not charging for it, it's an uncontrolled expense that you got to eat, no matter what the end result is. If the power company raised your rate, you're eating that because you booked the reservation and the rate last year. So you didn't build that 20% rate increase in.
Is it easier to teach a consumer about electricity versus water, though? Because, I think because people at their houses get a separate electric bill and can see the cost. I mean, I know it's hard, regardless, saying, "Hey, we're going to charge you for something we haven't before." But from a water perspective, I know it's up here, it's bundled with my trash, and it's the same. I don't see it as often.
Yeah.
And so, is there a perception that it's just inconsequential, and that's why I think they're more wasteful with water than they are electricity? Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right, especially because, everybody pays an electric bill. There's very few people generating their own water, but, a lot of people in the country have well water. They're not paying a water bill. And so that is a new concept to start paying for water and sewer. The hardest thing is to teach a park owner about billing their guests for electric. It's funny, the consumers get that and the park owners don't. We had one new park in Alabama come out of the ground, started charging electric, on day one. You stay there one day, you're getting an electric bill. And they've had zero consumer pushback. And it's, they've been running now for almost a year, no complaints. So the consumers get that billing for electric model. It's the park owners that are hesitant to change the paradigm.
Yeah, I think that some of that is a lot of these park owners have been going to the same conference for 20 years, talking to the same people who go to the same conferences for 20 years, who all have never charged for electric.
Yeah.
And so it's a completely foreign concept to them to think about doing something differently. And that's not a slight on any of them, right?
No.
That's just the common example I give to people when they ask me about, do you believe in certain things, is Santa Claus, right? If you grew up believing in Santa Claus, and then from whatever age 6 or 7, when you started having doubts, from that point on until when you're an adult, you only ever talk to people who still believed in Santa Claus, you would believe in Santa Claus. Like you would.
Yep.
Right.
And so it's the same thing. It's just who you're surrounding yourself with.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
But tell us more about like electric. I want to hear more about, because this plays right into what we're talking about, right? Optimization, operations.
Yeah, I mean the cool thing, and the whole reason Wild Energy got started was to make it possible to charge for electric on short stay utilities. I was a camper. I was on the consumer side, and I couldn't understand why I paid the same to camp as somebody who had a bigger rig or a smaller rig, because I just knew that I was using a different amount of that utility. And again, being a consumer, you're used to paying for it at your house. So that's where the whole idea came from. And every time you explain that to a consumer, it's like, well, do you pay for your neighbor's electric? Do you want to pay for that guy who's got a Tesla plugged in at his pad? Or
hey, I'm thinking about buying a Tesla here, just to be clear. So
yeah, and same thing, Brian, you got campgrounds that don't want EVs in their park. No EVs, you can't charge. And that's true. If you don't have the infrastructure to do it, you absolutely should not allow people to do that. But
if you do,
bill them for it. That's a great guest service. Let them charge their EV. You're giving them an amenity that they wouldn't have at another park. And if you're able to capture that cost and bill them back, great.
That's all you got about electricity?
No, we can go on and on. No, ask questions.
We have a couple minutes left in the technical end of the show, but we plan to kind of just have conversation. So if anybody else needs to drop off, please feel free. But if we're having a conversation,
probably the big thing I would talk about is the regulatory side of it. I do a lot of education on what you can and can't do around electrical billing, and what kind of equipment you can and can't use to bill people. And I think we need more education in the industry on what is allowed and how you should be doing it, because there are people that are getting public utility notices that have non-compliance, and you're putting your campground at risk, and you're opening yourself up for class action lawsuits. That's not something that anybody wants. We're working with one very large property management company that is going to audit every single property they manage to make sure they're doing it compliantly. And I think that kudos to them for trying to do it the right way and make sure they're doing the right thing for the customers that they're managing for.
Hey, Mike, we need to hear that voice at Ojai so that we can make it a national program.
All right. Yeah, Ojai is actually, I'm working with Ojai to change some of the regulations, specifically in California and in Mississippi. There are some tough utility regulations that don't allow for recovery. And again, that goes back to it's not fair for the business owners. I've talked to the public utility commissions. They're open to changing the rules. Nobody's ever asked. So, and then you just have to walk through the red tape of, well, how do you get that reg changed? And, publish it, and it's got to be open for public comment and push through. And,
but this is just public utilities, right? Like this is only like what if you have private solar, are you still governed by the same rules?
Nobody's got enough solar to run their campground.
I'm just making something up, right?
Yeah.
I'm just making something. But
so you have to abide by the public utility regulations. And
every state is different. Even depending on the city, some cities have their own ordinances about.
That's right.
New York. Of course, there's no campgrounds in New York City, but they have very weird rules on electric chargebacks.
Yeah. San Diego's a great example of that. They went hard after a couple of campgrounds that were charging inappropriately for electric and fined them significantly until they got their stuff under control. So,
what are the common ways that you see campgrounds usually making mistakes with the way they charge electricity? Because I think that's maybe a good place to, we're not going to be able to talk about this for the next 2 hours, although maybe we'd like to. But
number one, building the electric into your rate is a huge mistake. And it's funny, we just did a property for a very large group, a couple hundred parks, and we put meters in and started measuring things and gave them the data, and they're like, oh my God, the number that we baked into our rate was way off. We didn't know it, that we were not recovering enough. And so, they have an opportunity now to improve the cost recovery and improve their bottom line. And just that data is very, very helpful to make informed decisions instead of just taking averages.
So besides that, which is obviously a very important point, and you're like with Wild Energy, they would be measuring this exactly, and they would be then recouping the exact dollar amount. Like they can't go over, right? In depending on the jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It also brings when you start metering somebody, it brings the consumption down. The number that's hanging out over my shoulder is carbon reduction. So the minute you take a campground and you start metering and shift it to the consumer, they use less. And so that's better for the overall infrastructure of the park. You're not going to be doing capital improvements as often. You're not doing breaker changes as often because, they're not jamming your power. So your maintenance costs go down. And we provide an on-screen view so that the end camper can look at what they're using, so they're informed. That cuts down calls to the front desk that hey, I don't trust my meter, because they can look at it themselves. So there's a ton of intangible benefits that you get by shifting that to the consumer side.
Makes sense. Jeff, any good questions for anyone on the?
Well, Mike, you know I love your product, and when you figure out the water one, we'll.
Did you write Jeff a check for the show? Because I didn't get it to check.
Yeah,
you were spreading some love around.
Well, we're working with Mike's product at other places. I'm actually installing it this year in my park because, and I hate to admit this, we have not been billing electric for the last 2 years because the program wasn't working correctly. So this year, we actually reduced our rate for seasonal, and now we'll be billing them back for electric. And in the end, I believe that we're going to gain about $200 a site over the season. We are one of the campgrounds that limits the amount of seasonals we take because we're located next to a big amusement park. Yeah. So we do well with transient. But I have other parks where we took where they thought they were going to be transient. And when I worked with them, I said, why are people going to be coming to this park on a visitation? You need to be a seasonal campground where people are coming to relax for the weekend. And we actually filled them up with seasonals and got rid of all the transient, cut all the costs, operating costs by about 20%. And now it's cash flowing very well. But it's always, it's not a straight answer on a park or for operations, whether it's going to be a seasonal park, transient park, a hybrid park. It's a function of cost. It's a function of demand. It's a function of rates. There's so many variables that enter into it that you can't have a standard answer. That's one of the things we specialize in. And if you need due diligence, it's one of the things we specialize in is doing performance on parks and looking at the parks to find all the things that might be wrong with it that would come up later for a new purchaser, because most people buying a park don't know what they're looking for.
Or building a park usually. And please talk to Jeff or some similar company, right? Before you build or before you buy, God. Please.
Even with design, there's been, my hobby is I visit parks, of course. And I go to a lot of new parks that I look at them and go, oh my God, the sites are so narrow. The sites are too small. The roads are too, hard to get in and out of. They built a $30 million clubhouse. Who's going to use it, and how are you going to spread that over the rates? So
that clubhouse thing fascinates me, Jeff. Like, I know people use clubhouses more than the use case I'm going to go, but I still to this day will go to any conference or any travel, and I'll stay in a hotel and just desperately wonder who sits in the chairs outside the elevator of the hotel.
Well, I do. That's how I met you.
Is that really true? No, that's not true, is it?
No, you've got those chairs.
I forget lots of stuff. It could be possible. How long have we known each other? It's been like 15 years.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Right.
Yeah, I remember you when you were a baby and you were a U.S. citizen.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mike.
I mean, Jeff brings up a good point. We have investors that look for parks that are not metering because they know there's an instant opportunity to start recovering that cost and improve the NOI instantly. So they will go and buy parks, knowing that they can make money day one by putting metering in.
Well, and going back to that, operations, it's the same thing. If they're not charging a fee for credit card collections, we can boost the revenue 3%. Just by instituting that, and people are getting so used to that charge. When we first started it, people would just back off in horror that we were going to have them start doing that. But people are starting to accept it, and the cost for us to take credit cards is getting up there because they're dinging us for a lot of little things. And
what about crypto, Jeff? Just take crypto.
Different episode.
How do you pass off? How does walk me through how you charge a transient who's coming for the weekend? Mm-hmm. What are they doing? Are they just billing it when they check out? How quickly is that coming through? Seasonal, we all get. We know how to do that. They do it once a month, or even monthlies. That's easy. But the transient, walk me through how it works with your company.
Yeah. So the great news is, we're integrated with about almost a dozen property management systems now that do that automate that whole process, right? So on check-in, that PMS will go grab the meter reading, and then on checkout, whether it's a day, a week, or 2 weeks, they grab the meter reading at the end, do the calculation, and bill it right on the guest folio. So
it's automatic. It's all computerized. You don't have to have somebody go to the site and check the meter. And
correct.
It's already okay.
Yeah, Mike. Don't most of the places, they have basically a charge built in for, say, and just a number, 1 kilowatt is built into the price. What you do is if you use over that, then you're billed for the excess. And what it does is try to get to the people that have 2 air conditioners, electric heaters, things like that.
So, I've worked with the PMSs, and those features are in some of them. It's called power allocation. It's an okay strategy. It's not a great one. It does help ease people into being billed for electricity. But I had a good in-depth conversation with Rafa at Blue Water about that. And I said, okay, Rafa, you go over by 1 kilowatt and you get a bill for 39 cents on your, you get a charge for 39 cents. How does that make you feel? And he says, yeah, I don't like that. So I think it's better to just, if you're going to bill, decide, what duration you're going to start billing utilities. And I would go down to 5 days plus, if you want to start somewhere. That is not daily, that is long-term or, short stay or whatever you want to call it. But start with 5 days plus and start grabbing that expense recapture right to the bottom line. And then, once that is kind of the norm, move it down to daily.
Yeah.
What's the cost to put a meter on each of these sites?
The cost, roughly in the $150 ballpark to put a new meter in there. I tell people that is a better capital investment than a fire ring, a picnic table, because it's actually recovering your cost, and it's going to be there 20 plus years versus, you're going to replace that $800 picnic table in 6, 7, 8 years. It's going to have to get replaced over and over.
Mike, is that per? I'm sorry. Is that per site? Okay.
Yeah, and then there's some, there's some.
Is there a monthly charge?
There is a monthly charge, yeah, and that's in volume. So it starts at about $6 and drops down. So again, that gets passed through usually on the rate because people don't want to have all these extra charges. We do have some campgrounds that do they call it an administrative fee, and they'll make it $6.50, $7. I've got one property that does $25, and his thought process there was, I'm charging them for the seasonal site. $25 a month isn't going to kill them, and I'm going to pay for all my equipment. So it's just the mindset, and again, what your clientele will bear. I always say on average daily rate, you know, you got to add 20 cents and you've got that covered. So if you can increase your rate 20 cents a day, or you can increase your monthly by $6, you know, you're covering that. You want to increase it by 10, now you're paying for your equipment.
So you're saying we could just increase the rate by those guidelines and then not buy wild energy meters?
No, you're paying for the meter.
Uh,
That's what
Mike, do you see the daily billing or even going from 3 days out billing? I picture that as being drawn down from the mega parks down to the mom and pops. I don't see the mom and pops starting that phase because they don't have the demand in most of the places to be innovative on that, but the mega parks do, like Margaritaville's and some of the bigger Jellystones, where they're the destination park. I think they're the ones that can start that trend. But just like the credit card fees, it got started, but now it's being accepted across the industry.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. The smaller parks are starting first. They are the quickest to adopt new technology and make changes.
Okay.
The big park owners, multi-park owners, are very hesitant to change, you know, what they've been doing. I've been doing it this way. I don't want to change it. So they're more hesitant to make that change than the individual park owners.
You know what's fascinating though? I bet you, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I bet you when the big park people come to talk to you at the trade shows, they're like, we're going to do this tomorrow. And then that flips into what you said when they go back home.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. If they're financial,
I'm not picking on them, right? But just
no. If they're financially oriented and they can run numbers in their head and they know how to, then they get it right away. It's the people that don't understand their financials that struggle with it.
Yeah. Well, my point is I think the big park owners get it right away, and I think they want to do it right away. But then they run into the machine that is their big, huge. Yeah. So that's what my point was overall.
One executive's like, I don't. It's decision by committee instead.
That's why they need Maya and I to talk to them and say, you're throwing money away.
We should just put together, like, Mike, you and I should just put, and maybe we can sneak Jeff into this package and Mia. We should just put together some kind of like epic like package where we take one meeting a month. So there's like crazy demand and we look like we're backlogged and we have a wait list for people who can just come in and purchase a park and put in wild energy and use AI and like just cut their expenses by 80%.
There.
Have a good case study for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
use my new park as a case study if you want.
Which one?
I said you can use my new park as a case study.
You're a realtor and you bought a park?
Were you not paying attention? You just said that earlier, Jeff.
You look sane.
Come on, Jeff.
Jeff, I gotta put my money where my mouth is, right?
Well, I'm not allowed to buy any more parks, or I'll be single because I got rid of all of mine. Now I have a technicality that I can invest in a park, but I don't own it.
I mean, that's fine.
Yeah, because if my wife asks me, I say, no, I have not bought a park. Absolutely not.
Seems like a very dangerous fine line that you should navigate offline away from. I don't want to take sides. So
sounds like you were a lawyer in a prior life, Jeff.
Well,
but
accountants can read the law.
But there is, for as much as we joke about it, right? There is a market for that, for not like just being that exclusive and putting together, but just what you said, Mike, for people who can come in and reduce that operating expense of a park and know for sure they can do it when they're looking at a cap rate or whatever the NOI is, and so that's what we tell people too with AI when you come in, like especially with labor. And so I think there's something that could be put together between multiple providers in this space to market that in a better way to these investors who are trying to come in and be more cost efficient, but also still provide a better guest experience, because this is going to be, going back to your very first question, Jeff, what do we think 2025 is going to look like? I think 2025 is going to be down or flat for a lot of people, unless you're just started marketing off, right? And you've never done any marketing before, then maybe you have a chance to be up a little bit. But so I think you're going to have to pay more attention to many things, but one of those things is going to be your margins. What are your costs for things? And there are ways that through metering or through credit card processing or recouping fees or using AI or whatever, that you can do this very easily in 2025. And so I think maybe it's a conversation we're not going to have on the show, but
right, because one of the if you have an older park, one of the new fixes to save some revenue would be to put the investment into your Wi-Fi and get rid of your old cable systems and your cost of fixed cable, let people stream, and the Wi-Fi is going to work. Everybody streams anymore anyway.
Why not just buy a bunch of Starlink dishes and rent them out to people per night?
Well, there you go.
You can have them installed on poles outside, but just flip them on when they want internet. Rent them out. Like, wouldn't that make more money than maintaining and revamping a Wi-Fi system X number of years and trying to figure out all the signals and hassles and trees and I mean, maybe not the trees. You still have to figure it out with Starlink, but you only figure it out once.
Yeah, well,
once.
People want trees until they want Wi-Fi.
Yeah, until they want their Starlink dish to work, right?
Yeah.
But if you were renting the dish and it was on a pole and it was in the same exact location, you would know where it was, that it got coverage. It'd be screwed in and locked down. You just flip that dish on if they pay for it.
Yeah, I don't know. My profile is, we want to. Internet is one of your biggest amenities anymore in a campground.
But everybody has cell phones. Everybody has 5G. Everybody has hotspots. So, like, I don't know that there's like there was even 5 years ago. I don't know that there's a need with all capital letters, for people to absolutely have that, like there was years ago. So I think maybe you can get away with it.
I'll have you come to my front desk when the Wi-Fi goes down.
Okay.
Because,
like, I'll just pull out their phone and be like, "Did you know there's this button here that you can toggle on? That's a hotspot. Whoa, your Wi-Fi's back."
Yeah, no, they don't know that.
I know, but like that could be part of the education process,
right? Well, and you know that I carry, along with my phone, I carry 2 other hotspots just so that I've always got my own signal, no matter where I am. So
I don't know that I actually did know that, but good. That's awesome. Yeah, I used to do that.
Yeah, but there's so many avenues that we can go down. We haven't even touched operating systems for your campground management systems, procedures.
Well, that's why we have this call, though. That's why we restructured the show, because every time, like, again, Mike and Mia and Brent aren't going to be here, but you and I will be. And so the idea is let's dive into those operational things week by week so that people who are interested in that can tune into the show. Okay.
So that's pretty much going to be the standard of this time when we come on is going over building systems, operations, cost savings, financial.
Why do you think you're here? That's why we picked you for this episode, man.
Oh, hell, I never know why I'm here.
I mean, I don't know why I'm here either, too, but just to mess up my mic and screw around with the studio and curse at things before the show starts.
So I'm going to have to get all fancy then, like you, and get my Rush Limbaugh microphone, golden microphone, and
we need to create
real plan.
Yeah. We need to create better plans for people who are on the show, not just for the recurring guests, but for like Mike. I mean, Mike was asked like trade show questions. So should we require guests to have their booth set up behind them? I think so.
You mean you want me to have my banner instead of my backdrop?
Yeah.
Mike, were you at OHI last summer?
Yes, sir.
Yep. Okay. Yep. I don't know if I ran across you or not, but we had a booth there in Orlando, the one in Orlando, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Been there, done that. Yep.
Last year
wasn't that 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
No, 2 years ago. Where were we? Oklahoma.
Okay, I think we're talking about.
No, Orlando was 3 years ago in Ohio.
Yeah. Where were we?
Okay.
Yeah, Kansas City, Oklahoma City, and beautiful Louisville.
Where did your hat go? Put your hat back on. Honor your grandfather.
It got warm in there.
Well, you guys are asking me,
my head's in his grave right now.
I'm asking questions.
When I was alive, I didn't have air conditioning. Suck it up, Jeff. Leave the hat on.
Yeah, come on. Brian, I admit I'm old. You don't have to remind me.
I admit I'm old.
Yeah.
So
and you've completely ruined my partner.
I've completely. Why have I ruined your partner?
Greg is so far down the AI hole that every time I talk to him, he can't talk to me direct. He types it in and has AI answer me.
You watch, Jeff. You watch. In less than 2 years, and I'm telling you this, in less than 2 years, you will turn to Greg and you'll be like, I am so glad you started learning AI 2 years ago because we would be fucked without you. Can I just say fucked? I don't know if I can say fucked.
It's your show.
That's true. But like, I don't know if people get offended by that. But it is what it is, right? Like, I think you're going to do that in less than 2 years.
I do admit I use it, but I still, when I'm building strategic plans and doing other things, it's still, I want to use my experience to develop. And he keeps telling me, well, it is, if you run your thoughts through AI, it's still your thoughts. And it's like,
it's true.
It is, but that's not the way I talk. If I'm talking to you across a table, I want the same thought process to come out of my mouth as I would put down on paper.
Of course, but how much can you scale a table? And I don't want to divert into the AI thing, but how much can you scale the Jeff across the table? Like, I mean, I do, but like I don't in this conversation, right? So like, yeah, how much can you scale the Jeff across the table is my point. You can't. You can scale Jeff on the phone more. You can scale Jeff on email more, but you can't scale Jeff across the. So there has to be a difference in that in order to scale. Anyway, let's go back to Brent. I want to talk more. And by the way, like anybody's welcome to leave if you guys want. Like we're just having a good conversation. I know everybody has things to do except for me apparently. But so, Brent,
well, I have to go shovel my driveway, Brian.
What? You don't have a robot for that? You know, I bought my girlfriend's parents. They're my I guess I don't know. My in-laws were not married yet, right? But I bought them those snow melting. There's a company called Heat Track that I've been using for like 20 years. I bought them from my dad like so long ago. But they're wonderful. You just stick them on your mat and you like plug them in and like your doorstep. And they sell driveway path ones and they sell ones for your roof and they sell so you don't have to shovel anymore. Like,
yeah, if you
just
just
talking about you were looking for an investment and you had capital sitting there, invest in your back.
So Brian, you need to solve the freezing water line to an RV problem because that keeps you can keep a campground open if you keep the water flowing.
Well, you can monitor it. Are you talking about monitoring it or solving it?
No, solving it. Yeah.
I don't want to build you. That's your department. You're building all kinds of wizard hardware things over there, right? There's got to be something though. I bet you there's some kind of because, like, and I'll tell you, and this is just the weird things that I may or may not know. Years ago, I remember backing this project on Kickstarter, where it was a butter knife, but it like vibrated in such a way if you held it that it would like slightly heat up to slice through the butter easier. So I bet you like 15 years later, there's probably some kind of similar technology that would at least vibrate it enough to where it would keep it above freezing. Like not in Canada, but like in North America. Not that it would vibrate or anything, right? But I'm sure there's some kind of technology right there that we just have to figure it out, Mike.
It's all heat tape using electric. I like it.
Right. Well, we invented a heat tape. Company that I had a piece of, we invented a heat tape called Frostex, which is a great little one that you can put because it'll even work on a water hose and not melt it, unlike some of the other heat tapes out there. But it doesn't solve the problem for me as an operator. Why? Because we get 36 inches of frost.
Mm-hmm.
So, and unless I had put in heated terminals at the very beginning of my construction, I can't keep them warm enough. My water, we were built as a summer park.
Yeah,
we'll never be I've got some main water lines that are maybe 12 inches deep. So
here's what I want you to build, Mike. I want you to build a self-contained water meter system for each site that will apparently make my camera go off. Lisa, I think you're rolling on the cord. But try to move your chair now, Lisa. But anyway, so I don't know what happened to my camera. Anyway, I'm better looking without it. But build a self-contained, water meter system that can recycle people's water in real time, and then you can keep, like, you don't have to build water pipes. You can just have like a water tank on each individual person's site that can clean the water and purify it in so quickly that they will never need to have water pipes.
Yeah, I think NASA did that for the space station. So
I think they
mass produce that and put it in every RV. We're good to go.
You'd be even richer than you are now, which is probably pretty rich. With all the people who need electricity, it's coming soon anyway. So it's not like, is that crazy? Is that too crazy of an idea? Like in 20 years though? I don't know.
Hey, nothing's crazy if you can figure out how to do it. It's the crazy people that made all the innovations. So
that's right.
But yeah, it's interesting.
I'm going to have to go. I got a 3:30 coming up. It was very good meeting you, Maya and Brett. I probably have seen you at a show or two, but haven't stopped and talked to you. If you want, all my information should be on Brian's page someplace, but I'm willing to talk to you anytime off the air, because this is what I love doing, is talking campgrounds.
Definitely. Nice to meet you, Jeff. Appreciate all your insight.
Yeah, we should probably wrap up at some point anyway now, especially if we don't have a camera. So, but yeah, like Mia, tell us about your property. What's the name? Are you able to say that? Did you close already or no?
Not yet.
Okay, so don't say it.
Yeah.
But we want to hear about it. Like, we'll try to have you back on the show. Maybe tell us about your experience as a campground owner. But I wish we had more time to dive more into the brokerage aspect. I'm sorry we didn't. I think we had a good conversation, though.
Invite me back. We'll chat.
For sure. Absolutely. But where can they find out more information about your brokerage if they're interested in selling their property?
On my website, it's anycampgroundbrokers.com.
Okay.
And give me a call. We'll chat if anybody has any questions. Like I said, I also do a little bit of consulting, usually trying to assist in people thinking about succession planning and growing value. So.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Brent, where can they find out more about your reservation system for long-term guests?
Yeah, sure. So the website is opencampground.com. There's a section where we could basically give you a demo of the website or of the app and kind of just walk you through what we have to offer.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Brent. And Mike, where can they find out more about Wild Energy?
Well, best thing is to ask your local campground. I mean, we're all over the place now. I think there's only a couple of states we're not in, North and South Dakota. So you might not get a good reference there, but every other state we've got dozens of customers in. So, asking your peers is probably the best thing. We can answer the specific technical questions and implementation questions. And we're at www.wildenergyco.com.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Yeah,
thanks for joining us for another episode of Fireside Chats. I swear I'm here and I'm not an AI somewhere in the background, but we'll see you next week for another episode. And take care, guys. See you.
Thanks, Brian.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of MC Fireside Chats with your host, Brian Searl. Have a suggestion for a show idea? Want your campground or company in a future episode? Email us at hello@moderncampground.com. Get your daily dose of news from moderncampground.com. And be sure to join us next week for more insights into the fascinating world of outdoor hospitality.